So, with Phil and George, when we always come together, there's always technical difficulty. We didn't realize until 11 minutes into the show that our mics weren't on. And so you missed probably the greatest part of the show, because we started off by talking about the Great Realization, which is a step above the Great Resignation. If the last year and a half has taught us anything, it's that people have had time to evaluate both their life, their professional career, and where they want to go. And that's why we're starting to see a lot of people leaving the workforce, leaving their entire industries. Then the next step we talk about is what leaders can do now to turn around and slow or stop the turnstile, meaning exodus, people just up and quitting, which is a huge challenge. And if you guys are interested, by all means, reach out to us and we'll go into that in more detail. And then where we leave off and transition, where you pick up the video, is we talk about either you are contemplating career transition or you are in full job transition. And that's where we leave it off.
Just it's 1 week at a time. You want to equip your team to be able to achieve those goals on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis, ongoing. I'd like to pivot now, specifically talking about helping our viewers land a job faster. Something you know a little bit about. We touched on it earlier. The headlines are pretty grim. The job market's horrible. Is this an area where you can help our viewers?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, to me, I wrote a book, last year, as a matter of fact. It's the 1 year anniversary with a couple of weeks to spare. I wrote the book with the intent that being in career transition the first time, I realized that there were so many people out there, and there was great books about networking, and there was great books about how to write resumes and how to interview. But there was no book that said from the time you left your last position, whether laid off, reduction in workforce, what have you, to the time that you land. There's a lot of things, and I realized it was a process. Kind of my background. And as I talked with great people, great leaders, I actually started writing notes, and I think over 40, 50 books of just networking with great people like the Lenny Newmans of the world and the Jenny Jeffords of the world and the Ann Pryors, et cetera, just gave me tidbits to be able to put a book together to help people.
Well, that's excellent, because I actually have a copy of your book right here, as a matter of fact. It's an award-winning book that's been popping up in coffee shops, at airport terminals. You folks may have seen it on the stand already. First, congratulations on publishing your book. Obviously, it's resonating with people. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's actually over 90 reviews on Amazon right now, 5-star reviews, people giving first-hand testimonials as to the power of how this book has helped them land faster, get more focused on their job search. Why do you think that is? Why is it resonating with so many people?
Well, I think because of the fact that I experienced it, and I bear a lot of things that I probably would have normally not done. Like taking a job at Home Depot for 6 months. Because at the end of the day, people can look down at you, but they're not going to help you pay the bills, right? So you got to find a way to at least slow the bleeding. But I kind of reference in the book is that I learned more about plumbing, because I was in the plumbing area, in 6 months while I was working there, than the previous 45 years of my life. I mean, I had 2 great mentors I was working with and I was supervising. One gentleman was a master plumber for like 30 years, and the other gentleman had worked for that Home Depot store for 20 years. He knew every part. I mean, I stayed there 6 months and I was still just awed as far as, oh yeah, I know where that's at. That's an aisle this, and it's, in the lower, it's like he walked right to it. And I'm like, I don't have that memory.
Well, and I think that it's incredibly important to realize that people are always on a journey. And I think sometimes we see people like that and we think, oh, it's so easy for them to remember, or it's so easy. But it took time for them to get there, and it took a disciplined approach. And that's what I love about your book, is that your book doesn't really sugarcoat it. If you want to land faster, if you want to find that job that's going to fulfill you and take you to the next level, you're going to have to work for it.
Yeah. Oh, you definitely. The book's about heavy lifting. And what I have found, the difference between the people who are successful in landing faster and the ones that kind of sit on the sideline as the Eeyore, the oh, woe is me, is they put in the work. I mean, it's a job that you can't delegate. You can't just say, hey, how many recruiters do you know? Because the recruiters are for the clients. They want to hire somebody with the specific skill sets and everything else. And you might hit the lottery and hit that, but the best options are really developing a plan, a structured day, a roadmap to networking, and creating the wow factor, all the things that are talked about in the book.
Well, and I think it's very important that we remind our viewers that this is not going to have the name and address of your next employer in it, where you just turn to page 10 and you automatically get a job. This is a very structured approach that George has lived, he's executed, and he's helped other people execute. I want to share a couple other numbers here real quick, George. Statistics that our viewers may be aware of, may feel personal about. 95% of people out there right now are considering a change, even of the currently employed people. And 92% of those people are willing to switch industries to change, to find the right position. And this is during a pandemic, when you would think most people wouldn't want to make a career change because you'd want to be more conservative. You'd want to, job transition is a very stressful time. Why would people during a global health crisis with so many people out of work consider changing jobs?
I think the fact is that they've seen the last year and a half, and it's given them an opportunity to self-assess. I mean, like you had stated, I've helped professionals and executives. I've actually had 3 or 4 CEOs come to me and they're like, George, I don't know what I want to do, but I know what I've done the last 5 or 10 years is not what I want to do going forward. And I've helped them kind of create that map. And I think it's just, people are willing to make the change. I mean, right now it's optimal because there are more jobs than there are people unemployed. The unfortunate thing is there's about 10.3 million jobs available out there, and there's only 8.1 or 8.2 million people still unemployed. So there's still a gap. And I think the big gap is the people who are still struggling. It's in the book. It's a roadmap. You need to know, what are you going to do daily, weekly, monthly? How am I going to keep myself motivated? Who are my board of directors? All those things are in the book, and it helps them land the job faster.
So George, I think it's really important here that we also talk about, we talked about, you've established yourself as a process improvement expert. You work for billion-dollar organizations. Why help people in job transition? I mean, these folks they're unemployed. They probably can't pay you very much. You could certainly take what you do and package it and sell it in corporate America. Why help people in job transition?
To me, it's a personal satisfaction, of helping somebody in probably one of their lowest times, because B, I've been there, right? I've known, there's times when I don't even feel like getting out of bed. I mean, if you believe that, right? I mean, I try to keep positive enthusiasm, high energy, but even I get down, right? One of the great leaders, and I work with right now, I mean, he talks about, being above the line and below the line. It's okay to go below the line, but don't stay there, right? And you've got to find ways to get above the line. Kind of like Michael Jordan, everybody's like, he's the greatest basketball player of all time, at least in my opinion. But the fact is that he even says himself, there are many times when the ball was given to me and I didn't make the shot, right? But got to continue to sharpen the saw.
Well, and there's a great example. I think a lot of people assume Michael Jordan was born a great basketball player. And where Michael Jordan was able to differentiate himself, and he said it for years, but so many people don't really pay attention, is he became the greatest on the practice court. He worked when the lights were off and the cameras were turned off and there weren't reporters around, harder and more often than anybody else, because that's how he knew he could raise the bar on his personal performance and be a better professional. People only ever see what happens on game night. And the same thing's true of job search. People always see the person that sends the announcement out saying they landed. But if you want to land faster, you got to put in that work when nobody's watching.
Absolutely, yeah. If anybody has not experienced career transition, it's one of the things that they don't teach in school, which is, I would say, is a sin, right? Is because we don't find out these things until we need them, like, balancing a checkbook and interviewing for your first job. Same thing with career transition, like myself. You're in a deer in the headlights. What is this process? And you're frustrated, at least I was. All these people before me have gone and actually landed. Why isn't somebody wrote a book about it, right? And the book shouldn't be 400 pages because no one wants to read a 400-page book. That's why it's like, here, read it a couple of days. I'm a slow reader, so even if I've read my book a number of times. It takes me a couple of days, so I'm sure you could do it in a day.
Well, a lot of people have, and I was going to share some of the testimonials on Amazon and some of the other sites, but the reality is that I encourage our viewers to go out there and Google the book, Hired by George Murray. Hired, cut your career search time in half. See the testimonials for yourself and make your own determination. I think what's really impressive to me is that it's not just, we're based here in the Twin Cities outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. But you've got people not just across the country, but across the world have gotten their hands on this book, and it's helped them get results. George, if I understand correctly, you've taken over 2 decades of your experience improving process to codify this process for job search. And to help people land a job faster.
Yeah, I not very confident a lot of times about the things. I'm always the last guy to leave. The first, I might not outwit a Stanford grad, right? But I'll outlast him. The Rock says it. You won't outwork me. The same thing here. I'll be here until 11:15 p.m. at night while other people leave at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. But back to your point. One of the best, and there's all of them out there as far as ones that have been really thankful for the job, or the book. There was a gentleman in January. I remember this was the first week in January. He calls me, and I get this number, and it's actually overseas number, and I picked it up, and he goes, "Well, first of all, I'm surprised that the phone actually works. I'm really appreciative of that. Second of all, I was connected to somebody in Twin Cities that made a comment on your book. I went out and got it. This guy's from Australia, right? And he goes, your book helped me." And we went on and talked about it for 10 minutes. And to me, I was just like, it's only the first week in January. You've made my entire year. And that's really the intent of my book is not to make 1 million copies. I mean, that would be great. But to me, if I could turn around and say somebody like that I wouldn't have met, alive or dead, to reach out and say, what you've done has made an impact and helped me. That's really a lot.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the specifics in the process, because one thing that I think that often happens is when people see a book like this, they think, all right, well, they're a professional writer, they're sitting at home and they're writing, they're researching. But you actually have a full-time job, maybe a job and a half, running a large global manufacturing organization as a leader, operations leader for them. Let's talk a little bit about the outline to help a job seeker find a job.
Sure.
And what do you think is the first step that somebody realizes that they're unemployed? What is it that they need to do?
Well, I speak about this a lot, and I've taken the meat out of the book and put it and said, there's 4 gears to career transition, right? And why I call it gears is because I reference it as driving a standard shift. Remember the first time you rode a standard shift? It didn't start off well, right? And that's kind of career transition. You grind the gears, you're going to stall, you're going to roll back. And
some of our younger viewers might not know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they just hit the start, right, and kind of cruise. But
push button cars.
Yeah, and to me, it needed to turn around and be resonated with a lot of folks who are in their first career transition. A lot of times it's in our mid 40s, and that's where I was, right? And so I said, hey, it's referencing, getting in the first gear, figuring out who I am, what just happened to me, how do I develop a story that resonates, and then I can move forward to second gear. And second gear is basically, developing my scheduled day, outlining that. It's also, setting up my, my value proposition, please do not use the elevator pitch. It's so 2016. But those types of things. And then as you pick up pace, you're hitting in third gear. And third gear is really, how do I, what's my scheduled day? I tell this all the time. There's three things. If you want to remember three things in the book, it's what's my scheduled day, what I do daily, weekly, hour, all the hourly and monthly, in order for me to move the needle. And every couple of weeks, I should be evaluating that. Take away the things that are working, add a couple of things, maybe cold call. I had cold called CEOs in $1 billion companies that would call me back in a couple of days, which I was floored. And then the fourth is really just bringing it across the finish line, with your personal board of advisors. If you haven't realized by now, especially in your first career transition, who do you work for? You work for yourself. You are the CEO of Phil Incorporated or George Incorporated, right? So as a CEO, you have to have a personal board of advisors. And I tell people, if they're not there to help you, listen to you, motivate you, and hold you accountable, kick you in the pants, because I have a few people on my personal board that do that quite a bit. You do that as well. Is you need that. And if they're not doing that for you, like a CEO, fire accordingly and hire appropriately, right? And then, all the way through creating a wow factor. A lot of times when you're sitting and networking, people, for the simple things, we're doing a lot of Zoom calls, we're doing a lot of team calls, but there's still also the phone screen calls. And I tell people, dress up, like my military career, I dressed in my dress greens and dress blues. I stood 2 inches taller. I talked with more confidence. You do that. And then you do that all the way through the finish line. I've had so many executives that come to me or professionals and say, I got to the final stage and somebody got out selected. And I ask them, did you do your 90-day plan? Well, what's that? And I'm like, let me help you. Let me, get you to the next round and you knock it out the park, because you've already invested all that time. You want to carry it across that finish line, especially if you're an executive. They're waiting for that. They're waiting for you to say, hey, what makes you unique and different? Like Kathleen Crandall says, our friend here in Minnesota.
Well, I'd like to take those steps and dive a little bit deeper. So you talked about the standard day. I think that we've talked about this many times, is that it's especially challenging for somebody if they've been with a company, say, for 20 years, and they've never had to actually look outside their company. What do they do when they wake up in the morning? And they've run projects, they've run teams, but now their biggest project, their most important project, is really themselves. And can sometimes be a scary proposition for somebody, even if they've been in a profession, in the professional world for a couple of decades. So we're all familiar with KPIs as leaders and running organizations, key performance indicators.
Yeah.
What are some of those key performance indicators that you think somebody in job search should be measuring and holding themselves accountable to?
Well, a couple of things is when I do coaching and helping these people across the finish line is creating that kind of metrics. I've got a good template that outlines, how many people you're calling, how many people you're networking with, how many people you're reaching out to. What I find very odd is, when you ask people, well, how many people did you talk to this week, right? And they're like 3 or 4. I'm like, I was doing 4 to 7 a day. Right. And it's like, what else are you doing? Right. The other thing is that, and we didn't talk about it specifically, but in first gear, it's an opportunity to reflect. So I was in my first career transition 3 months. I looked in the mirror and I was really just appalled at I was frustrated and appalled at what I've seen. I was, not eating healthy. I was overweight, probably the heaviest I'd ever been. And I said, you know what? And this is kind of where my motto came in, is that I'm going to get better and I'm going to start today. And I'm going to compare the person I was in the mirror yesterday. So if we did 1 burpee, you do 2 burpees the next day, right? But over a period of time, over 7 months of my first career transition, I dropped 40 pounds.
Wow.
And, that gives you self-confidence. You look, but hey, I look pretty good, and you get more energy for it.
So, and I think it's important too, for our viewers to understand the context. That 40-pound loss was over how many?
7 months.
7 months.
Yeah.
So it wasn't in 30 days.
No.
It wasn't, and again, you did the work.
Yeah.
You made a plan and you set small benchmarks for yourself. You executed the plan, and that led to a better fitness, better healthy lifestyle. As someone is waking up and they're saying, okay, I need to find a job. And you touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to talk a little bit specific. You said making calls, making networking meetings. What does somebody in job search really need to be thinking about? What is the number one asset that they have, and what do they need to be doing and talking about?
What value they can provide to an organization, right? And like I said, you can't go on 7 minutes when somebody says, "Tell me about yourself." You're right. You don't start off like I call Charlie Brown's teacher. I'm an executive that's got 20 years of experience. Wah 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 wah. Right? Because you're not being unique and different. But throw a curveball. Make yourself. When they leave the coffee shop or they leave the interview, they're like, "Hey, I remember that guy." Right? So one of the ones that I love to use, especially when I'm looking with CEOs and board members, and it was actually a previous job I actually landed. The CEO said, "George, tell me what you do. What's your background? What's your experience?" And I said, "I'm a rappel master. Much like my military career, I drop into difficult situations. I quickly assess the team, develop collaborative strategy, and execute it. Do you know anybody who needs somebody like that?" And it's like, hey, I know the rappel master. I haven't gone into coffee shops. They don't remember my name, but they remember the rappel master.
So, and I think it's important to clarify, we're not suggesting that our viewers misrepresent what they can do.
No, you're pulling something that's unique out of your past, and you're putting a stamp of who you are and what your capabilities are. And so it's resonating within that says, hey, you know what? I need somebody to come in and quickly assess my team. I need somebody to turn around and coach them, mentor them. I need somebody to set a plan in place. And I also need somebody to turn around and hold accountable, right? And execute and support. I mean, as a leader, your responsibility is to remove roadblocks for making people more successful.
Now, you've also been really on both sides of the table. You've been a job seeker, and you hire people all the time. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of articles written about age discrimination and people being discounted because of their age. And you often say you don't necessarily believe age. It's not about the number.
No, I don't think so. I think there's some to it. I mean, there is definitely that. But I mean, we've been told all our lives, at least when I was growing up, act your age. Well, that can be detrimental when you get to our point, right? Because when you're interviewing and you're coming off like an Eeyore, or you just don't have the mojo to get it done, I mean, how you're basically being interpreted as, is this person going to be able to motivate a team? Is he going to be able to turn around and execute it? He's going to be able to support. And does he have enough gas in the tank, or she have enough gas in the tank in order to turn around and get the results that are needed, right? And that's what you need to do. So I always tell people, I'm like, don't act your age, right? Like I did, I cut my hair short because you don't want to see the gray. But you have the energy and it's focus, and you're, I mean, to me, and we were probably muted the first 10 minutes, so we probably need to go back about, what's going on in corporate America. But leaders really need to help people remove roadblocks, make them more successful, getting them a part of a collaborative team. That's how you get them engaged. And that's how they want to stay at a company. So you can turn around and eliminate them for ever even considering looking outside.
I think it's great advice. It's fantastic, because I think that even for folks that are sole contributors, the energy and enthusiasm you bring to your job, it goes back to, like you said, about bringing value to the organization. So often people focus on what they've done in the past, but yet when you're interviewing, employers don't really care so much about what you did in the past, because they care about the impact you're going to have for them going forward. And you talked about having a 90-day plan, and there's sometimes I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
When you're hiring somebody and they present to you a 30, 60, 90-day plan, what are you looking for, and how would it be that you would find it to be impactful?
Well, I think it really goes all the way to the first interviewing process. You're taking notes and you're building this 90-day plan. And so that when you get to your final stage, you can sit down with the hiring manager and say, after all the conversations, all the team discussions and the panels and everything else, here's what I consider my 90-day plan to be. And I'm more than willing to review it the first week we start, and we can tweak it, accordingly. And it reinforces the employer that you've taken it a step beyond. You've already started thinking about, based upon the concerns that the entire team's brought to light, here's how I would approach those things, how I would engage with the team, how I would get to understand all those particular challenges and prioritize them. And you know what? Every week or every other week, we can sit down one-on-one and say, what's going well, what's not going well, what help do I need?
That's great. And really finding balance and not over-promising what's going to be practical and realistic as well, right?
No, great. I think, the first, 30 days, it's interesting. I was working, one company I worked for, one of my bosses is just like, you got to go, you got to do something. I'm like, hey, the plan was, and we agreed to the 30 days. I got to listen. I got to understand. I mean, these folks have worked here for quite a long time. And for me to come in and start barking orders when I don't know how the processes are going, and believe me, I've had to be calibrated a lot of times doing that because, I want to be successful. And I want to support the company to be, at the next level.
Well, and I think we've all had experience early in our careers where we may have had our first leadership role and we went to execution phase right away. And if you don't connect with your team and your coworkers and your peers and develop relationships, you're going to flame out really fast.
Yeah, no, but great. You can be the sharpest tool in the drawer, but if you're not listening, no one's going to use you. No one's going to want you to be a part of that team.
So we talk about doing a daily plan and the 30, 60, 90. How about from the employer standpoint? If I'm trying to assess people that are unemployed, that are in job transition, what are the things that I should be looking for, or where should I be looking for candidates?
Oh, I mean, the first thing is looking at your network, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I don't think a lot of companies use well, is that, we're all looking for resources and skills, right? But just posting a job and hoping that you're going to get somebody, or, recruiters are busy. I mean, they've got tons of jobs that they're looking for, and nothing against recruiters. They're doing a great job. Is that there's just so much need out there. It's like, you need to turn around and balance it all. And so, hey, I know somebody that's looking in marketing, right? Hey, do you know anybody? And that's kind of how it gets going, right? It's just, it's kind of seed that just kind of builds and builds. And, before that, you've got a nice, great lawn and a great team.
It's another expression that I've heard you use in the past is that we're not plants.
Yeah.
and maybe you could share with our viewers a little bit about that perspective.
Yeah. To me, and this is probably resonates what, when we were probably muted, is that where people are actually looking at, what, I've been here 20 years, right? And this last year has really not been favorable. And it's given me an opportunity to reflect. I mean, people are looking for lesser roles, lesser pay, just to be more happy, right? I mean, I think we chase happiness way too late in life if we chase it at all. So I think people are realizing that, I don't have to be here another 20 years and maybe get the golden, watch, et cetera, which doesn't happen anymore. But the fact is that, be willing to try something new, doing things different. And I think this whole realization that we kind of led the conversation where we muted is really kind of circling back, is that people are looking, that says there's more out of life than coming to work at 7 and just, not feeling happy at the end of the day. So that goes and resonates back to leaders. Leaders, you got to get out there. You got to understand what's challenging, remove the roadblocks, make sure that you don't make Mondays, suck.
Well, I think that it kind of brings us back around to the value proposition as well, because I think in my experience is that when people feel that they're making an impact and bringing value to the organization, they feel more fulfilled. And it's kind of a circle. And then the organization feels like you're contributing more, you're more valued. And then you feel more energized to create more value and bring more value to the organization. So when the folks that are in job search are thinking about their individual value proposition, what would be a good way for them to reflect on that?
Well, I think the thing is, go beyond the job description that you're looking at, do the research, go on and check Glassdoor or whatever, and kind of find out what the problems are, and then look back into your tool bag and say, hey, here are the 5 or 6 things that I can do successful to really carry it across the finish line and drive whatever KPIs or or achievements that you need the organization to do. I think that's really the good step.
And probably also then being honest with yourself on where your gaps are and where you're
definitely.
Because I think that sometimes we're so anxious to blame the situation, blame your former boss, blame your coworkers. But there's a reason you're unemployed, and sometimes we have to kind of sit back and maybe take ownership that we were a part of the problem.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think the worst thing that you can do in career transition is not self-reflect, to say, what's this learning process? What could I do next time so that I make sure that I don't make that mistake? I think that's really critical.
You've got another book you're working on. You mentioned it earlier. Re-engaging your team, ignite a workforce, and retaining your top talent.
Yeah.
When can we expect to see that book?
I'm really excited about this book. I think this is really going to really pop beyond the cut your career search time in half. Because of the fact that this past year and a half, there's so much turmoil in businesses, and what are the great tools, and what can I do to retain my talent and help create a stable work environment? I mean, every organization is experiencing that right now. So to your point, I'm hoping that March, right in the March timeframe, it's going to be out there, and it's going to help a lot of other organizations, not people, but organizations and leaders. Right?
It's incredibly timely. I think we're seeing that in the marketplace right now. It's incredibly perplexing to me how some of the organizations often are just not ignoring, but they're not obviously addressing the folks leaving. You don't see any memos, you don't see any meetings, you don't even get notice sometimes that your coworkers have left, and you're wondering why they're not returning a call, or an email bounces back. From a leadership standpoint, how do you think leadership should be addressing when all of a sudden they maybe say they've lost 5 or 6 key employees over the last month and a half? What is something that the leaders should be doing with the existing team directly?
Well, I'd say first of all, it's the old adage. My dad said this when I was young. It didn't resonate to me until I got older. Is be careful when you're pointing your finger, because 3 are pointing back at you, right? So I think the leader has to self-reflect, right? The first thing. I say the second thing is, call the team together and ask. Just be humble and say, hey, I'm here. I'm a person just like you. We got all different roles, but we're on a team, right? And so the thing is a leader has to be humble enough, and more importantly, willing to take the feedback and make adjustments.
And would you also say that is not just have an immediate reaction? Maybe take the feedback, process it, chew on it a little bit, because I think all of us have kind of a knee-jerk reaction, like, well, gosh, we can't afford that, or that we don't have enough time to do what we're supposed to be doing every day now, and you want me to do this extra thing to make you feel better about working here. And it's not that the people are bad people, but maybe they're just not approaching leadership in an optimized way. Is that fair?
No, that's a fair statement. I mean, I can tell you, like my organization right now, I mean, we're trying to incorporate an even better culture, and those types of things you're talking about. What's causing us to go below the line? What help do we need to get above the line? And the CEO I work for, I mean, he's just a tremendous coach, mentor, and he's self-reflecting. And I think one of the things a leader doesn't do enough is focus feedback. So when you say, hey, give me some focused feedback, but be specific. And this is what we're trying to install in our culture, right? And I think it's timely, right? We got to be open to ourselves to basically say, okay, thank you for the feedback, and do something different.
How about in regards to the organizations where people have left, everybody's doing the job of 1.5 or 2 people. They're kind of stressed. They're redlining. It's your expression. They're below the line. They're just.
No, it's not it's actually from a great book in the culture that we're driving. I really believe in it. It's a really good model.
So the people are pushed to the limits, and they're overworked. How is a leader So, obviously it's great to say that we'll sit back and we'll listen to, but your people are going to tell you that they're redlining, they're pushed to the limits.
Not necessarily.
How can they navigate that in the short term as they try to re-equip for the long term and get things back?
Well, it'll be in the next book, but I can tell you that the leader, I think the thing is that once we get momentum, we want to keep momentum. And we really, and including myself, have to find a way to pause, right? And then, take Sally or Fred aside and say, hey, I've noticed this, right? That's the first step, right? Recognizing people, saying thank you, going above and beyond, bringing a flower to somebody who's really, helped you from a different department that didn't really have to do that, right? Just to say, hey, I recognize what you've done, and I took the additional time to go out and do that for you, right? That says a lot about a leader.
That's tremendous. George, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, I do want to turn around and go back, because we were on mute the first 5 or 10 minutes, about what's happening in businesses right now. And that is the Great Realization, what we alluded to. People are looking to lead the workforce. You stated it, they probably didn't hear it, but 95% of people are considering it, jumping out of a total different industry. Like I remember jumping out of an airplane, perfectly good airplane. It's like, hey, is this really going to open up? But people don't have that fear. They're just saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to go try it. And organizations have to come to the realization that whatever they're doing and whatever they have been doing is not going to work going forward. So they've got to adjust. You got to do that self-reflection. What can I do differently? What does the organization need to do differently, so that we can retain and keep these, great people that were working for us?
Excellent. Well, thank you folks for watching. And again, if you get an opportunity to pick up a copy of George's book, it's Hired, Cut Your Career Search Time in Half. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, on Kindle if you don't want to wait for a hard copy and you want to just do it online. And we ask that you also consider joining us right here on LinkedIn Live, the first and third Saturday of the month, joining us for coffee with George and Phil. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening and a fantastic weekend ahead.
Hey, man, it's been good. Great face-to-face.
Great to see you.